sparks and the love is real. So could we be willing to jump into that pot called life, knowing that that life wants to live itself through us? Or are we going to play it safe? Are we going to play it safe? One of my heroes was Henry David Thoreau, who talked about living deliberately. And he says, I want to have an experiment and choose to live my life deliberately so that when I come to the end of my life, I will have not lived somebody else's version of my life. Could we have the courage to live that life, even if it means coming out of the closet and being who you truly are? Because let me tell you, from someone who's lived in the closet, who's tried to live a lie, it is very, very hard and very, very painful. Very painful. To run from the truth of your being just to please the world so that you think that you are safe and you won't lose your job or have the condemnation of others just by being who you are. Isn't that interesting? I remember when I came to the church years ago, and Judy remembers this, there was a fairly nice-sized congregation when I came. Half of them were gone. I said, what happened to everybody? And she said, well, you're gay. The other half didn't want a gay minister. I said, well, had I known, had I known. Well, I'm glad I came and that you didn't tell me. Jack kept the secret from me, Jack Albright. Because, and I would be perfectly okay, and some people don't think that gays should be probably doing ministry. But the Native Americans, they called them the sacred ones that were the gift from the gods. They called them the bird ashes, who had the balance of the masculine and feminine energy. They saw it differently than a lot of others might see it. So I don't know. I remember Barbara Rowland told me that she had a gay bull. You see, you're born this way. It's not a choice. And I said, well, does he service the other cows? Oh, yes, he services the other cows. Well, how do you know he's gay? She said, because he's in love with another bull in the pasture next door. His name is Ferdinand, and he smells flowers, right? I don't know. It's just life. It's just life. Could we be okay with life, with all of its mysteries? Like I said, we're all the mother. That was this beautiful thing that this lady said in South Africa. We're all the mother, and they're all our children. And we left the lake house this week, and everybody's birthing. It's spring. Have you noticed? It's spring. And all the Canadian geese, they seem to be taking over. And they have huge little gaggles of baby Canadian geese. And what's so interesting, if you look at nature, it's not just the female that raises the babies. It's the male and the female goose. And the way they do it, and every morning when the sun would rise, they were all out in our front yard. And they would have from 2 to 10 babies. And one would be in the front, and the other would be in the back, and all the little babies would be following mom and dad. And they would be in clusters. So the people with the babies, they all hung together, and the single geese, they'd be squawking over here because they didn't have the babies. But it was everywhere, and this is nature. And then every spring, I hear a sound in my yard. I heard it down at the lake house too. This thing goes beep, 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 beep. Recognize it? It's the baby mockingbird. And Trey and I had rescued a couple fledglings in a parking lot on a Saturday night when the cars were all going, and there were these baby mockingbirds. And so we rescued, one had gotten hit by a car, was dead, and we rescued 2. We brought them home, and we called them George and Gracie. And all of a sudden became their parents. I didn't realize what that was going to be like, because they demand to be fed all the time. Beep, 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 beep. And of course, if you take them away from their mother, you've got to be the mother. And so we found out that you could feed them dog food, and we put it on the tip of our finger, and then you put it in the mouth of the bird, and they eat. This must have gone on for at least a month and a half as they grew through the fledgling stage. And for all you parents, I have total sympathy, because you get them for, 18 years? I had them for 2 months. Them. But they got to the stage where they needed to leave the nest. I needed to set them free. I needed to teach them to feed themselves. And they could fly, but they didn't know how to feed themselves. How do you teach them to feed themselves, Jan? How do you teach them when they expect you to feed them? And I have a little codependency in my nature anyway. So I'll never forget the day that Gracie decided she was going to fly the coop. And we had these huge trees in Atlanta, and she flew from the deck, and she went up and up and up and up, and she went to the tippy top of the tulip poplar, which was the highest tree in the whole yard. And there she stood going, beep, beep, beep. And I said, honey, I can't feed you. You're up at the top of the tree, beep, beep. So I had to surrender. I had to learn, as all your parents do, she's either going to fall from the top of the tree, or she's going to figure out what goes up can't come down too. And the next morning, we were walking in the backyard, and Gracie was flying down the tree, and Trey goes running out with dog food on his finger, and she lands in the yard, and he sticks his finger out, and she eats for the last time. Aww. And then she wipes her beak, and she looks at us, and she says, I'm done. I'm done. And she flew off, and we never saw her again. She had jumped into life, into her life, because she was ready to leave the coop. You know, Obama said something, and I like it. He said, I've evolved in consciousness. Have we evolved in consciousness to where we don't need that old-time religion? I've been listening to some of the pundits talk about hellfire and damnation and quoting the Bible literally. But the Bible admonishes things like slavery and all kinds of things. Have we evolved out of that old-time religion into a new spirituality that recognizes oneness, that recognizes a truth that is bound by an old way of thinking? You know, I was thinking of Mother's Day when I grew up in the 50s and 60s. The vision of mother that I saw was Barbara Billingsley on Leave It to Beaver, who would vacuum in high heels and pearls. Then there was Donna Reed, who also wore the same outfit. There was Jay Wyatt, Father Knows Best. All these lovely women who didn't work for a living, who had a man to support them. And then the women evolved a little more into the 60s, because then came Maude. And then came Edith Bunker. And then came Mary Tyler Moore and single women who worked for a living. And then it has evolved now into this 21st century, and you've got desperate housewives. God knows what that looks like. You've got the good wife raising her kids as a single parent. And then you've got Modern Family, where you've got a gay couple adopting a little girl, and a whole new way of looking at mother. So we have evolved from the 50s and the 60s to this new consciousness. Could we evolve spiritually? I wonder, I ask you. Could we go beyond the Bible? In the front page of the Huntsville Times yesterday, there was a woman, and it said a sad Mother's Day story, because she was a Catholic woman whose 20-year-old daughter told her that she was a lesbian, and the mother said, this is an abomination in my mind, and you are not my daughter. And with that, the daughter committed suicide. And the mother said, this was the saddest day of my life. But since then, the mother has shifted the way she sees things, and now she's an advocate for accepting them as our children and not condemning them. So could we be willing to evolve in consciousness out of a way of seeing things into a more expanded field of love? It's a real love. And when love is real, it bears all things, endures all things, accepts all things. I think that's Paul in Corinthians. So could we have that kind of God? A God of love, not a God of judgment. Helen Street used to say, you tell me a man, oh, that was Emerson. You tell me a man's argument, I'll tell you his God, right? Could we have a greater God, a God of love, that loves all with equanimity, and that is willing to embrace all her children? They're all our children. Even the gay bull was your child, right? Wow. Then life is just an amazing adventure.